Welcome to the latest Seahawks Draft Log live stream. Rob Staton and Jeff Simmons here. Before we get into the topics, just want to say, if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe, like the video. Everything helps. We have got so many things that we're going to be getting into as this season goes along. And I have got a feeling, I've just got a feeling that either something's going to happen in this hour when Jeff and I are speaking, or it's going to happen straight after. And I'm going to have to jump back on another one of these things and review what has happened with Seattle. Jeff, it was a great win for the Seahawks yesterday, and I do want to talk about the Commanders' win. However, I am just totally distracted by all of the trade deadline noise around the Seahawks. We had Jay Glazer essentially picking out the Seahawks as his team to watch. Do you know what? I keep doing this. I have not plugged my mic in for like the 10th stream in a row.
No, you sound great.
I'm going to do it now. For some reason, I just end up in a rush and I forget to do it anyway. So we had Jay Glazer saying the Seahawks are like the team that are being aggressive. We've now today had Adam Schefter going on Pat McAfee. And yes, they were talking a bit about the Seahawks yesterday. So that was kind of like that led them into it. But he was like, he's doing all these like hand gestures and he's doing all these impressions of people. And he's saying, he had this look on his face and he was going like, the Seahawks are like interesting. They're interesting. They're a team to watch. And he's like got this wry smile on his face because he freaking knows something. Now, whether this thing is going to happen or not, who knows? But he knows something's going on. And it's just a case of what is it going to be? And when you have Jay Glazer and Adam Schefter saying the Seahawks are being aggressive, Jeff, I have got a whole bunch of things I'm going to read out for you, which might get people a bit carried away. That I've been preparing for the show. But you have to pay attention to this, don't you? You have to. Something's happening here.
So the gestures he was doing is making light of one of his colleagues, Brian Windhorst, who's he's not a quite equivalent of Schefter, but like he'd be like the Mike Garoppolo for the NBA at ESPN. And there's a famous thing where he was not famous, but it's become like a gift now where he kind of put a trade together on the spot. And then he went like this, and it's like he's a larger guy, and like you'll see that on the internet all the time. That happened on live TV.
Oh, I remember. I remember now. Yeah.
So that's what he knows something. He knows something. Either they're trying to get someone or they're in on something, because that's the Brian Windhorst bit that everyone talks about. And I think he was been putting in little, like the idea he was alluding to today was that they're willing to trade Mafe and Woolen to give them more capital to then flip for someone else. So either they're working on a pretty high-profile player and they'll need those two, like the pieces to make that work, or he's just trying to add drama to the trade deadline. But I don't know. I don't know who this could it be Max Crosby? Could it be Myles Garrett? I don't know. But I have no idea. But look, when Jordan Schultz and Diana Rossini come out, I kind of take it with a grain of salt. They literally list every team that has a need and say they're interested in upgrading it. But when Jay Glazer and Adam Schefter are suddenly alluding to a team being very aggressive, and then John admitting he was at a college game and ran into a lot of GMs or other teams and was talking to them, I've been refreshing Twitter a lot today, and something's up. I don't know if I'll get it done by tomorrow, but certainly something's up.
I've never come across anything quite like this, Jeff. You know, we've expected in the past that the Seahawks might do certain things, or they might be aggressive, or we just know that John Schneider keeps, his ear to the ground and is open-minded about trades. But to have Glazer and Schefter speaking this way about the Seahawks, I've been refreshing all day, and I was actually thinking, what time do I go to sleep tonight? Because I don't want to go to sleep and then like half an hour later a big trade happened and then just miss all of this and then wake up in the morning and have no real time to react to it. I want to be awake when it happens. So I'm now sort of wondering, and it just, to me, it feels when you hear Glazer saying, and Glazer did say, look, it might not be the really big names that get moved, but he said they were being very aggressive. And, that to me sounds more than just they're going to bring in a Travis Gibson type. And when Schefter's sort of smiling and doing all that stuff, he knows they're working on something. And like you, I just wonder whether it's a case of, can they get it done? And if they are trying to move Maffei and Woolen to get extra stock, then that suggests it is something interesting. So there's a few different directions that I want to go in. There's a couple of things I want to mention, Jeff, before I get your take on this. First of all, I do think this is one of the benefits of, without wanting to sort of just promote Seahawks Draft Blog that much, I think it is one of the benefits of having a draft blog at this time, because I have spent the whole of this college football season, Jeff, pretty much saying, I don't like the 2026 draft class. Now, if anybody reads the blog or has listened to sort of anything that I've said about the draft over the last few weeks, when the Seahawks make a big splash, I hope that will have helped. Because if they come out and say trade away their first round pick next year in the next 24 hours, there is going to be a reaction to it. And some people will go, I don't like that. I'd rather carry on building through the draft or whatever. I think by talking about how weak, both in terms of top end talent and depth, the 2026 draft class is, I think that will help when they make a big trade. So I'm just sort of saying I think that's a useful thing at this point. And I want to reiterate it here. The 2026 draft is one of the worst, if not the worst, that I've covered since doing the draft blog. It is almost impossible to do a mock draft. The mock drafts that you see online are full of players who have absolutely no business being graded in round one. And when I read it, I think, yeah, that's awful. But then I think, but who am I putting in there? Because there aren't any alternatives. So I think if ever there was a year to be aggressive, both based on what we're seeing on the field with the Seahawks and other teams, in particular in the NFC, and with this draft class, there's never been a better year, Jeff, to be aggressive. So firstly, a thought on that, because this will not be good for business if the Seahawks trade away 2 high draft picks in terms of the draft blog. The people who will want to read about the draft will go, like it did after the Jamal Adams trade. But I don't care, because my main priority is not the blog, it's the Seahawks winning. And I think this is a great year to go in and make a splash if you can do it, Jeff. It has to be for a top player, though. It can't be spending a lot of money for a non-premium position like Jamal Adams. If they can go and land a top pass rusher, and I'm going to bring something to the table with you in a second, they can go and get a blue chip pass rusher in the next 24 hours, that would be a smart move, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think when you're looking at, I think you should put that out there online as much as you can, because if the deal gets out, it's not like you're reacting to it or trying to defend the team. Me and you have been talking about it really since like week 3 of the college football season. And look, we got to look and be honest. Where are they going to be picking this year? It's kind of a watered down league this year. There's not a great team in the NFC. At best, they're probably picking like 24, 22, somewhere in there. If the bottom falls out, they're still probably picking in the 20s. And they don't have a ton of organizational needs. They're a young team in general. They have a lot of guys under contract. They're going to let some guys go from this draft class that I don't think they're going to sign, the Boye Maffeis and Rick Woolens. I don't think they're going to re-sign Kenneth Walker. They're going to have needs there. But if you can get if you watch this team and you're seeing they're for real, like the advanced stats have been on them all year. They've been the number 1 like efficiency team in the league for DVOA for basically the last 4 or 5 weeks. And then you saw what happened when their offense and defense, especially, hit at the same time. You saw it in quarter 1 and 3 against Houston, but quarter 2 and 4 were so bad, it made you nervous because it was that bad. It made them think like they're still a first-round team. But when things are clicking, the way they can play defense, and now they're down a couple key guys with Julian Love going on IR and Ernest Jones getting hurt last night. We don't know the severity of that yet. This isn't a perfect team, and there is room to upgrade. And I still think the question left is they don't have a great edge rush. They still, even last night, they don't really disrupt the other quarterback that much. They had a great blitz with Witherspoon, and even Worry looks great so far. And Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy was kind of quiet last night, but still did some things. They closed some of these games against some of the teams you're going to have to play in the playoffs. And we saw what happened in Tampa, and we saw what happened. You're going to have to play Philadelphia, and we're going to see the Rams in a couple weeks, twice. They can still use some upgrades to really highlight either that edge rush, the cornerback spots. Josh Jobe gets hurt, so I don't think they're trading Rick Woolen unless they have a corner coming back. They could use a safety. They could use a linebacker. If Cooper Kupp's out for a while, maybe you want another receiver. So there are needs out there, and there are players that can help them. But I think to answer your bigger question, just I look at this draft class and you see like organizational needs, edge rusher, right guard, center, cornerback, running back. Not a lot of those needs are going to be first-round players. The edge rush is one you would love to, but drafting in the 20s in this draft, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't know. You know more about me whether the corner group is really good and whether you might find something there. No, I haven't seen that, and I don't think you want to spend a first on a receiver this year. So if there's a year, again, to get aggressive and trying to figure out what names might be out there, because like one of the top names I had heard was not for the Seahawks, just on the market, was Jalen Phillips, who was traded this morning for a third-round pick. So there are definite options. I wouldn't trade Boye Mafe or Woolen unless you could replace those players, because you're pretty thin at both spots if you take those guys off the team.
So I was going to jump to something just very quickly on this, because I agree with you to an extent, and people are saying don't trade Reed Woolen and stuff like that. I was listening to KJR earlier, and I made a couple of notes. He frustrated me, Jeff. They were talking about Mafe and Woolen, and the argument was from the host, I wouldn't trade either of them. And I just kind of thought, not a lot of thought has gone into this opinion, because the argument they were saying was, you can't trade those players away. Pass rushers are too important, and cornerbacks are too important. And I thought, well, let's just have a think about this. Firstly, with Reed Woolen, the host was arguing there are enough veteran players in this locker room to keep Woolen on track and to get the best out of him, etc., etc. And I just felt like shouting at the radio he's in the middle of year 4. If it hasn't happened by now, it isn't bloody happening. Why are you not talking about that? So that's one point. And then secondly, on Woolen, if the Seahawks wanted Reed Woolen on their roster, do you really think that we would have had the Ian Rappaport report saying, well, Reed Woolen could be moved? And then yesterday, or Saturday night, the Adam Schefter report saying, well, the Seahawks are getting things on Mafe and Woolen. They want that out there. I think you've just got to accept at this point, whatever anybody thinks about Reed Woolen, and this host was saying that he's interviewed Reed Woolen a few times and he knows him well, blah, 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 blah. Mike McDonald doesn't seem to want Reed Woolen on the roster. That's just, in my opinion, that's what I think is happening, that he doesn't trust him and he doesn't want him. And I actually think that they'd be right or wrong, and we could argue afterwards whether they left themselves short at cornerback. And I, Jeff, if they trade Reed Woolen away, I think they will add a cornerback at some point. It just might not be a trade. It might be that they go and pluck somebody off a practice squad or something and say, we're confident we can work this out. And maybe that'll prove to be a stupid move. But I just don't think they want Woolen on the roster. I think they want to move him on. And I think they'll try their best to do that, which is why they had the reiterated Schefter thing over the weekend. And then on Mafe quickly, I don't think they're trading Boye Mafe away purely because they think, we're not going to pay Boye Mafe. They've probably made that conclusion. We're not going to pay him. He's going to leave in the offseason. So let's see what we can get for him. They're only going to trade Boye Mafe away because they want to upgrade. Because they're not just going to move a pass rusher on and hammer the depth there. They are thinking about getting another pass rusher into this building, making room for them, and getting something for Mafe while they can, because they won't get anything from him in the offseason, Jeff. This is about upgrading, not losing a pass rusher. And I don't really understand why those two arguments, which to me seem pretty obvious that should be considered, are not being considered on the radio. And all they're going is, you can't trade those two players. Like, come on.
Yeah, I feel like people have jumped to the wrong conclusion on both those guys for a long time now. And look, we had Brady Henderson on our show in the summer, and him and Brian were going through the whole 2022 draft class, and Brady gave each player a grade out of 10 in terms of who he thought the Seahawks would extend. This was before the season, before camp. He gave Woolen, and this made Brian and me kind of jump out of our seats. I wasn't on, I was listening. He gave Woolen a 1 out of 10. This was in June. And so that number shocked both of us, but if anyone's tied into this front office and GM, and I think based on the guy, the most accurate reporter on the beat right now, 1 out of 10 he gave them. So it's not that they think he's a bad player. I think we've seen the kinds of guys Mike Macdonald's invested in. They're very high IQ players. They're very heady players. They're very smart players. They're very detailed. He always talks about how much they love to love football. And I'm not saying Woolen isn't any of that, but I don't think that's how you would describe Woolen. To his credit, seems like a perfect Pete Carroll player where he's a freak athlete. He's a height, weight, speed guy. He has unbelievable ball skills. When he's on, like he was in the Houston game, he looks like a shutdown corner. And there's times, but I just don't think that he's Mike's kind of guy. I think Mike is very different. And they invested like the first guy they paid, Julian Love. He is exactly the opposite of Woolen, like in terms of their strengths. And I'll never forget last year in the Jets game where they're trying to close the game and Tariq Woolen completely loses his zone, gives up like a 4th and 19, and Julian Love runs over and starts yelling at him. Like that to me was like, okay, this guy wants it, he gets it. And look, we saw what life without Woolen was like, and we saw Nehemiah Pritchett, and we saw Shaq Griffin in Jacksonville, who looked pretty big and slow and stiff. That scared me a little bit, I'll be honest. I was on the trade Woolen thing, then I saw now Job's had a second concussion of the year. I don't know what his situation is. I don't know if they have the great depth, but if you're the Seahawks and you're not going to sign this guy, and you have an opportunity to get something for him and possibly replace him, I get it. Now that I think they can contend this year, I would probably rather them keep him just for the year and then figure it out next year. But from this, it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what the Seahawks think. And their tone has changed a little bit until the reports came out again on Sunday from Schefter. I don't think Schefter randomly got that. I think he's in good communication with John and those guys, Woolen's agent. I think they all have a pretty good idea where this thing's heading. So this idea that he might mature, like he's been with these guys for 2 full years now. Yesterday, he still takes a taunting penalty, and we see him do some little things. And he didn't start yesterday. It was Witherspoon and Job, and he was coming in different packages once they went to nickel and things like that, dime. So he has been lapped on the depth chart. It's just now with Job getting concussed, I wonder if the equation has changed. With Mafe, even when the Micah Parsons name starts talking out, I know me and I think you were like, okay, Dallas is going to want a player back. Boye Mafe. So we already been talking about this idea of upgrading him since the Micah Parsons stuff happened in August. And so it always made sense. It's like the thing people don't forget is Boye is a free agent at the end of the year, and we saw what other guys get. It's going to take guys $20 million. Greg Rousseau got $20 million a year. Their stats are almost identical, and Boye has really good like spreadsheet numbers. So his agent could build a really good case. Like, so you got to remember, you're potentially trading a $20 million contract away to upgrade, and so that's part of the equation. I think Boye, he's a good complementary player. I don't think he's a difference maker. I think we've seen he had that one stretch in 2023 where it looked like he might be it, and we've never seen anything close to that. He's not a bad player. He's just not a difference-making edge rusher. If you can upgrade that spot, this idea of you can't trade him to me is perplexing. You can absolutely trade him. Like, he is a good but not great player.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you can trade him, and I think the point of trading him again will be because they've got somebody else in mind. I think it's as simple as that. And I think that you've just got to. That's how I would look at it anyway. I want to go through some of the candidates, Jeff. If they're going to make a big splash, if they're going to do something that has Seahawks fans celebrating, punch in the air, dreaming of a Super Bowl by the end of the day, I want to talk about some of the candidates, and I think it's obvious who the three are. There's a lot more talk, especially since the Bengals lost yesterday, that they're open-minded of trading Trey Hendrickson. That is the obvious one. That's the one that seems like it's most likely to happen as long as the Bengals are being reasonable, which you can never bank on. Yeah. Then there's 2 others. The Max Crosby thing, I've got a quote that I'm going to read to you in a second. And Myles Garrett, who... if there was any way of getting Myles Garrett, I don't think there'd be a price I wouldn't be willing to pay. I just think that is a player who is just a legendary, one-of-a-kind. You are basically trading for Lawrence Taylor at that point. So I just think if you could acquire Myles Garrett, then you would probably be you'd probably be the Super Bowl favorite in the NFC. And I'm ready as a fan to dream about that rather than dream about which player they can draft in round 1 for the next 2 years. So I initially had a look. I don't know if SpotTrack have changed. I'm sure initially when I looked at SpotTrack's data that they said it would cost the Browns like $100 million to trade Myles Garrett. I've had a look today, yesterday actually, and it says it would cost them $20 million this year and $40 million next year. Now, for a lot of, bear in mind, the Miami Dolphins have just paid $6 million for a third-round pick for Jalen Phillips. They have eaten $6 million so that Jalen Phillips can go to the Eagles. If a third-round pick is worth $6 million, what's 2 firsts and 2/3 worth? It could be worth $60 million. So maybe the Browns will think, actually, do you know what? All that dead money is worth it. We're in a youth movement. We're not going to win in the window with Myles Garrett. We need more picks. We are sort of embracing all of that change that we're going through right now. We're going to trade him away. If that is a possibility, then I am 100% all down for that. All down for that, because he's just an unreal player. It's a once-in-a-lifetime chance to trade. So when I think of Adam Schefter smirking and smiling and grinning and laughing and all that, that's what as I was driving home, Jeff, I was dreaming of Myles Garrett, I must admit. But I want to read you some things before I get your thoughts on those 3. There was an article in Yahoo Sports on Thursday, and a couple of reporters were quoted. One of them is called Yori Epstein. Yeah. And this was the quote. An NFC talent evaluator from another team didn't think the door was closed on a Max Crosby trade. I still think for the right price, Crosby could be on the move, the evaluator said. A first and a pick swap, most likely. If all you had to give up for Max Crosby was your 2026 first rounder and a swap of picks, Jeff, I would walk to the Atlantic Ocean, swim the Atlantic Ocean, walk to Las Vegas, and then give Max Crosby a piggyback to Seattle from Las Vegas. If that to do that deal, that is an absolute no-brainer. And then Charles Robinson added to the notes piece and said, "Don't expect a Max Crosby trade surprise unless Crosby asks for it, which I've been told he hasn't done." They lost again yesterday. And I'm just wondering, like, if Max Crosby turned around today and said, "I would like to be traded," and if this has all been kind of doing this behind the scenes, there's been a lot of this going on, and they're just working out a deal now, that would constitute a Schefter smirk for me. And then the final thing from Charles Robinson, also in Yahoo, was, and I think he's a respectable reporter. You know, he's good. He's very good. Good reporter. Charles Robinson said, "I've had 2 high-ranking personnel sources tell me that Howie Roseman would give up a significant bounty if the Browns were to make Myles Garrett available. It feels a little like other personnel departments are dreamcasting a bit and guessing what Roseman might do. But there's definitely a sense that the Eagles could be the one team that come out of nowhere to pull a big deal for a defensive player. Dot Connecting is going to speculate that player to be Trey Hendrickson. But if Roseman would genuinely be willing to give up the farm for a player like Garrett, nobody is off the table. I wouldn't rule out a Jalen Phillips or Bradley Chubb pursuit." Now, the Eagles went after Jalen Phillips and have got Jalen Phillips. I don't know if that stops them, prevents them from going after Myles Garrett now, as was pitched here by Charles Robinson. But he did not rule out Myles Garrett for an obscene trade. And he was saying the Eagles feel like the team that are most likely to do it. Well, in the last 24 hours, Jay Glazer and Adam Schefter have been hinting maybe it's the Seahawks who are willing to do a mega trade to bring somebody in. So maybe we should be just replacing Howie Roseman with John Schneider in that thought process. Maybe we should replace one bird for another, Seahawks for Eagles. Jeff, when I'm reading that, I'm thinking maybe Myles Garrett could be had as long as you were prepared to pony up. And maybe Max Crosby could be had if you're willing to pony up. What do you think?
Well, when we were talking a couple of minutes ago, those are 2 names I mentioned. So when Charles Robinson does say something, I listen. He is an old school double source your stuff. He's not Diana Rossini, who shares everything she hears. And even though it's absolutely perplexing, like the Bengals today wanting a first-round pick for Trey Hendrickson, that is as bad as a reporter that I've ever seen. There's a lot of things there that make sense. And look, the Eagles already did trade for Jalen Phillips. I wondered if that was the sign that Myles Garrett isn't on the market. And you got to wonder if the Browns end up trading him now. Why did they extend him and pay up that signing bonus in the first place? They could have got the same package for him in the offseason. But even when he went in the market initially, Myles Garrett was always connected to the Eagles. But the Seahawks probably couldn't have been in position to make a trade that time because they didn't know anything about their team. They didn't know if their quarterback was any good. Like, even me and you were doing a show in early September. We were saying you can't trade first-round picks. They're going to have to draft a quarterback. And, hell, Sam Darnold is right now is an all-pro quarterback. There was no scenario where I saw that happening. So the Seahawks equation has changed dramatically because quarterback was a huge – offensive line was a huge question mark. Wide receiver was a huge question mark. My initial view going into this year was, okay, there's no reason to trade draft picks. You're not there on offense yet. And now they're a top 5 offense. It's been shocking. It's been what they did last night, just again. So now all of a sudden, the Myles Garrett and the Crosby. And we know for a fact, John Schneider may have been jokingly, but they did ask for Crosby for Geno Smith in their initial talks. And I'm guessing that Pete is so goofy, he might have done it. I heard the GM had to be like, no, we can't trade Max Crosby. And what I love about Crosby more than anyone is he's not just like a great player who's like a great athlete. And he's the hardest working, most nonstop motor of anyone in the league. Like, he's one of my favorite players, if not my favorite. And he's just been hitting on that bad team for so long. But his energy and his work ethic, like Myles Garrett is a physical freak and just a physically dominant. But when you watch Crosby, he has a lot of the same styles, but his work ethic and his motor is unbelievable. And just like the energy he would bring to playing beside Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy, and Chenna, and Derek Hall, it would be nuts. And so I mentioned those two guys before you even brought those up. So if they're going to make the big splash, those are the names. I had thought about Jalen Phillips for a couple of weeks, but the Eagles, for example, they have 2 third-round picks already, and then they're getting another one for Milton Williams as a comp pick. So giving up a third-round pick to them was pretty basic. They're already going to have 3 of them, so they just lose 1. For the Seahawks, if they're going to make a splash, that's why the idea of moving Boye first to collect the ammo to go get those guys. And so you imagine everything would have to be agreed to pull the trigger on that. You're not going to trade Boye and risk not being able to replace him and screwing up your season. But look, it's still hard for me to imagine the Browns trade Garrett, because why did you sign him if their team is in the exact same spot everyone would have thought it would be? No one thought they'd be good this year. They didn't have a quarterback. And so if the owner says, okay, enough's enough, or he pulls the right strings, but Crosby, it's like the whole Pete Carroll thing was supposed to get you to win. It was supposed to revitalize the franchise. Is Geno Smith going to be back? Like, can he really sit through another like year of this? He's never been near the playoffs. I think there was one year where they played Cincinnati, and other than that, nothing. It's at some point, like, their teams are going the Browns, I have no idea what they're trying to do with Garrett. Like, he doesn't fit their timeline at all. And all of a sudden, Crosby might not fit the Raiders' timeline at all. Because outside of Brock Bowers, there's nothing really going on there that's young and exciting.
I've just, Jeff, over the years, I think one thing that I would say, again, this is the second time, like I mentioned with the blog being useful at this time. You know, you and I were talking about Sam Darnold to the Seahawks halfway through last season as a possibility. You and I and the lads that I stream with, we were talking about Geno Smith and how John may be more inclined to move on than perhaps some members of Seahawks Twitter and stuff like that. And that was definitely the case. I feel as if our conversations about Pete Carroll over the years were justified, and the need to do stuff and how that sort of thing would come to a crescendo, and it did. I think one of the things we've done well, I think with Jalen, to an extent, the stuff I wrote about Jalen Carter just not feeling like a fit for Seattle, you know, there's other examples. One of the things I think we've done well on this stream and sometimes on the blog is sort of just reading the tea leaves, piecing things together, sort of looking at things in a way that maybe others aren't. Others will look at it in sort of a black and white sort of thing. They're not going to trade Myles Garrett. That's not happening. They're not going to trade Boyer. They're not going to trade Russell Wilson. That was the other big one I should have mentioned in the list. was sort of that willingness to talk about the chances of Russell being traded when it was staring everybody in the face, and there were journalists out there going, that is not going to happen. With this, I don't know whether, obviously, neither of us know, Jeff, whether the Seahawks are going to pull off an absolute shocker in the next 24 hours. But there just seems to be something that might make it so. Just there's too much noise. I don't think Schefter's pulling that face and doing that thing today, and Glazer's doing what he did yesterday, because the Seahawks are going to throw a swap of 6th and 7th round picks for a backup guard on the Washington Commanders. Like, it just doesn't seem very likely. I don't know whether it may be that the Seahawks are not going to make one big splash. It might be that they add a right guard, add a lower level pass rusher, add another cornerback or a safety or a linebacker. Maybe they need a linebacker after what's happened yesterday. It could be that they make 3 or 4 moves to add players to upgrade certain positions, and that's the splash. That it's quantity rather than necessarily quality. But I've just got this feeling that they're working on something, and now it's about convincing these teams to do it. And if you are the Browns, you have done everything in your power to basically be as young and as crappy as you want to be, to sort of learn what you can learn this year. The minute that you move, look what Joe Flacco is doing in Cincinnati. And you didn't want Joe Flacco. You want to play the 3rd round rookie. That's fine, but that's because you're trying to learn about the youngsters, and you're accepting that this year is a rebuild year. I think they basically signed Myles Garrett because they poorly ran. You know, they basically just didn't know what to do, and they panicked, and the trade request was there, and I think they shat themselves and ended up giving him a huge contract. What they really should have done was get what they can and move on and have more picks in the last draft, and maybe the ones going forward. I just feel like now maybe they are saying, look, Myles Garrett's 30 in December. Like, if you this is your last chance to trade him, Jeff. This now and the offseason. You have got a 6-month window to trade Myles Garrett. Otherwise, he's a Brown for life, and he's just going to be Joe Thomas all over again. Like, you have got a 6-month window to do this. If you trade him today, you will get 2 firsts plus whatever else. The minute he gets to 31, 32, that's off the table. No one's giving you 2 first-round picks for a 32-year-old pass rusher. So if they want to do it, they've got to do it now. And that's the thought on him. And then with Max Crosby, again, like, he just looked miserable yesterday. And everybody looks, Pete looks miserable. Geno Smith looks miserable. Everyone looks miserable because it's not really working out in Vegas. They need to be embracing the need to get younger and better and have good drafts and go 2 or 3 years down the line. We're going to try and compete. When Max Crosby will be 31, 32 years old. It's the time to trade him is now. And it's $5 million dead hit this year, $5 million next year. That's a lot cheaper than the $20 million this year, $40 million next year for Myles Garrett, which might make him harder to go and get. Jeff, I'd just love to see the Seahawks go and get one of those 2 players. And if it has to be Trey Hendrickson, I'm not against that. But those 2, they just feel a little bit more star power, bit more youth, only a little bit in Garrett's case. If you plonk Myles Garrett onto the edge against the Rams in a couple of weeks' time, it's a totally different game. Same if you put Max Crosby there.
George Kittle was doing an interview this week with the local media, and out of nowhere, just brought up how good Seattle's defensive line is. Like, out of nowhere, unprompted. And maybe they watched the Houston game and how good they looked in that game, and watching that front against Houston and Jacksonville, and what DeMarcus Lawrence did, and what Murphy did, and what Leonard does every week. Right now, they have already what's like George Kittle, who's their rival, thinks is one of the best. If you add Myles Garrett in, that's what wins the Super Bowl. Like, to win a Super Bowl, you typically need to be great at something. Like Philadelphia had that great offensive line. And with Saquon Barkley in there, it was dominant. They could win games without basically anything from their quarterback. Jalen Hurts' first 3 playoff games last year were horrendous, and they won the Super Bowl. Every team, the Legion of Boom, they had the most insane defense and secondary we've almost ever seen. Right now, the Seahawks defensive line is really good. I don't know if anyone would call it great because I think they're missing the guy who disrupts the other team's quarterback. I think that's the one thing they're missing. Leonard's playing a defensive player that he's an all-pro, in my opinion. Byron Murphy's a borderline Pro Bowl. I've been really impressed with DeMarcus Lawrence. Derek Hall is good, but they don't have, outside of Leonard Williams, anyone who's elite. And Garrett on his own, like he had a game a couple weeks ago where they got killed. He had 5 sacks. 5 sacks, and they lost by 30-10. He is just that special. If you put him with these guys, what he can do for them, with the way he can unlock the whole thing, sort of what happened when you put Saquon Barkley with the dominant Eagles O-line last year. It was the most dominant part of the league. And the Rams, all of a sudden, the Seahawks are very close in point differential. The Rams have a very similar defensive line with better edge rushers and probably a better quarterback. And what's going to stop Matthew Stafford? I don't know if it's our defensive line. I think the edge rush is really going to help. So right now, the Seahawks are a really good team. They're a really well-rounded team. Guys have emerged that we didn't think they did. We've talked about this for years. JSN is becoming an all-pro level player. Sam Darnold has become right now playing an all-pro. I don't know if that will sustain, but he is. Leonard Williams, again, all-pro level year. We haven't even seen Devin Witherspoon yet. Like, he made an impact last night, but the guys we needed to emerge, some of them have started to emerge. Their offensive line is no longer – we don't even talk about the offensive line anymore. When was the last time we got through a Seahawks season where Anthony Bradford is a hole? Not very good. The center position is passable at best. Like, Jalen Sundell's fine, but he's not a difference maker. 3 of the 5 spots are pretty good. Not a lot of different makers, but again, that's what wins Super Bowl. Seahawks are a good team right now. I think they can win 1 or 2 playoff games. I don't know if they can win the whole thing, what they have, unless this keeps up. Because we haven't seen them play a great team yet. Like the Rams game coming up, it's going to tell us a lot. But, God, if you put one of those 2 guys in this team, my God, it changes their entire ceiling.
Here's something else to consider, Jeff. I think this is a really good point. Apparently, the Seahawks, according to Schefter's report and followed up by Brady Henderson, intend to sign Charles Cross, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Devin Witherspoon at some point in 2026. And if you're going to sign those 3 players, you have to put a lot of money aside, pay a lot of cash up front to those players to guarantee their signing. Okay. If you trade for Myles Garrett or Max Crosby, you don't have to pay them. You don't have to worry about that. They're under contract. They signed contracts this year. So the only thing that you have to account for is their cap hits year to year. It's like they've always been on the Seahawks. Like if you acquired, if Max Crosby or Myles Garrett's contract was expiring this year and you were trading for them like Leonard Williams or Ernest Jones, you probably won't be able to do it because if you have got to pay all of the other players, you won't be able to pay them as well because that's another mouth to feed. It's another whole tens of millions you have to put aside that the Seahawks might not actually just have in cold, hard cash to burn next year. With these 2 players, you don't have to worry about that. You do have to worry about it with Trey Hendrickson. If you trade for Trey Hendrickson, then you have to pay him a lot of money. That's going to be very difficult, which makes me think, Jeff, that's why it's Garrett or Crosby that they're shooting for. Because those players are under contract. They only signed deals this year. So you don't have to worry about it. So that's another reason to keep an eye on those 2 in particular.
That's a big deal. That's a huge deal. And Hendrickson, I've been told, was not huge on their radar early. They were checking in on him because he's not a great run player. McDonald, what he wants is everyone to be versatile, run pass. And he's a pure pass rusher. He's a sack guy, but he's already older. He's been banged up this year. So I don't know if he's – and Rob, you're going to be so excited I had to check Twitter while you were talking to see what happened. But, yeah, if you can get those guys, you don't have to deal with signing them. You don't have to deal with the franchise tag. And you got these guys locked up, but they don't have to pay the signing bonus. The signing bonus goes prorated, and you just get them at their annual hits. And, again, they have that $20, $30 million they never used this year. So – they got money. They got cap room. They got cash. You're not going to sign Mafe. So the difference is $40 million versus $20 million. It's not – there is a huge – if they can get the picks to work. Now, Cleveland and the Raiders are stubborn. They seem to not understand where they are. But if Seattle can make these guys do it. And then the reason we killed the Jamal Adams deal and the Jimmy Graham deal wasn't that they traded for a good player or they traded picks away. Obviously, that's not ideal. But it was the positions they traded for. They traded for a chess piece safety that they never knew how to use. They traded for a chess piece receiver, Person Harvey, they didn't know how to use. They traded for a very one-dimensional tight end that couldn't block in a team that emphasized running the football. I always said if they made those exact trades, but for offensive and defensive linemen, like, did anyone rue the day we traded Leonard Williams now? At the time, it seemed nuts. But he wasn't anything close to this with the Giants. If you're trading for edge rushers, left tackles, when they trade for Dwayne Brown, that worked out pretty well. Don't trade for receivers. Don't trade for chess pieces. Look at the Steelers with DK Metcalf. He had 6 yards yesterday. 6 yards. Defensive ends, left tackles, quarterbacks, these guys change every game. And they're worth any price you can pay if you can get a guy like Garrett or Crosby.
And let's be clear here. I feel like we've spent the last 40 minutes explaining why things could happen, and there's someone in the chat saying, "Oh, won't happen." It's like we've provided no actual counter argument, just saying it won't happen. It's boring. The reason that we're talking about this is because there are reasons to believe that there's something going on, because we're hearing it. There's noise, and it doesn't mean that something will definitely happen. In fact, it wouldn't be beyond the realms of possibility for the Seahawks to believe 1 hour something might happen, and then the next hour it's off. That can happen sometimes with these things. No one's guaranteeing that anything's going to happen, but something's going on. They're not being, Schefter saying what he said, Glazer saying what he did. People can take it as much as they want to. Jordan Schultz saying they're a team to watch. There's a lot of things today that suggest the Seahawks could be interesting. Now, the other thing I wanted to say, Jeff, and if you have a super chat, send them in, because I'm going to run through those at the end. What if it's not a big splash? What if they are looking at different positions, which is, because Glazer did say they're looking at a number of different positions. Let's say that they don't make one big. I've tried to think, because that linebackers obviously could be an option. Quincy Williams is available. Logan Wilson's available. Would Miami be interested in trading Jordan Brooks back to you? I don't know. A few weeks ago, I mentioned Devin Lloyd purely because the Jaguars GM is from the Rams camp, and the Rams do not like to pay linebackers. Devin Lloyd is out of contract. Now, he's somebody that you would have to pay down the line potentially. But I just wondered whether or not the fact that they're allergic to paying linebackers might make him available. I don't know. We'll see. The Jaguars season's kind of gone a bit wishy-washy since they were beating the Niners. So they might be more inclined to get picks and rebuild. But then there's other things, like Minka Fitzpatrick's name comes up. By all accounts, it sounds like they're going to give Tyre Carter the opportunity here. But I would make a call for Minka Fitzpatrick.
So
Kevin Zeitler keeps getting mentioned. I'm not against that, Jeff. Like, if he wants to come and play in Seattle at right guard and replace Anthony Bradford, I'm certainly not going to rush to my laptop to complain about it. People will connect people like Rashid Shaheed just because he's played for Kubiak. But then there's sort of like wild card things. Like, if Miami are doing a fire sale, like, would they at all consider something for Aaron Brewer? Like, is that totally beyond the realms of possibility? I think that'd be ridiculous. I think any team is prepared to sell an offensive lineman in their 20s who's really good needs to be fired on the spot. But
yeah.
There are plenty of stupid things that NFL teams do. And then, I also wonder a little bit, like, what are they actually prepared to do here? Because one of the other things they're going to come up with, Jeff, is like, what do they do at running back? Like, are they going to pay Ken Walker? Are they going to pay Zach Charbonnet? Are they just going to run them down and let them walk? Like, what are they going to do there? Like, would there be a team that, would chuck something for Zach Charbonnet if they prefer Ken Walker now? There was that link with Devon Achane not that long ago. I mean, I think he's one of the most exciting, electrifying weapons in the league. If you swapped a Charbonnet out, who I like Charbonnet as well. This is definitely not. I know a lot of people are down on Charbonnet. I'm not. But if you put Achane into this offense, I think that's electrifying potentially. I think he's sort of perfect for this system. Is somebody like that available that, if you're going to be that aggressive and you're going to try and move players on, move players in, like we're talking about with Maffei, is that something to consider? I don't know. Have you got any thoughts on who might be a wild card that they might go after?
The one I was wondering about was Jalen Waddle until I saw that they want like a first-round pick for him. So no way in hell am I trading a first-round pick. There's just a huge lightning bolt outside my room. Sorry. I am not trading a first-round pick for Jalen Waddle. We were talking about Jalen Waddle again in September, so how funny would that be if that ended up coming to fruition? But the Miami Dolphins GM, I don't know if you tracked this story, they had leaked to Palestero and Garofalo that they weren't really interested in making trades. And everyone's like, what? They're like a 2-5 team going nowhere. And it was a very weird rumor. I was like, I don't really understand. And then the Dolphins lost on Thursday night, and the GM literally got fired. And the reason that what I was told is the GM got fired is for not having a clear vision of what the team was. Like, he thought they were still in the mix and they could still win this year. And Mike McDaniel was like the betting favorite to pick to be the first coach fired. Like, watching them this year, like, that team is just nothing. So the GM gets fired, and the already guy makes a splash today. So I think they're going to be close to fire sale. And it's a guy who's been trying to get a GM job for years. This is his finally interim role. They've already traded Jalen Phillips today. I think Bradley Chubb might get traded. I think they would consider trading Waddle. I think Jordan Brooks is a guy that might make sense. I think anyone, they're so messed up, the Dolphins. They have no direction at all. I think the amount of picks that they can get, they have a bad offensive line, they have a bad defensive line. So I think for them, they're looking to deal. And I think it was very telling that GM specifically got fired before the coach, because I think that was directly tied to the rumor that they weren't interested in doing business, which the owner must have been nuts. And so I think I think you've mentioned a lot of the names you would put together for this team. Like, Kevin Zeitler's a guy we know they've gone after a few times. They tried to get him for Russell Wilson. They tried to get him at different times. He played with Mike McDonald in Baltimore. I don't know Tennessee's deal. I don't know if he wants to fly. Like, the issue I was told initially was never want to live in Seattle. But now you're on like a 1-7 team that clearly sucks, and the Seahawks can't help not but watch them on Sunday Night Football and think, holy crap, that team's going somewhere this year. I wonder if that changes the equation with someone like him. I know some people have leaked like Wyatt Teller, but don't know what his situation is with the Browns. Again, are you going to trade a decently guard in his prime? He's the guy who messed up Shannon Nwosu's season, almost his career last year. I don't know how they would vibe. So I don't know if you want to mess up the dynamic of the locker room right now. I think linebacker, you can look around the league because you're going to play the Rams in a couple of weeks. And if you're starting Knight, and so there's the guy we talked about in New Orleans, DeMario Davis. I wonder if they double back there. Shaheed is a guy that don't know if I'm going to spend a high pick on him. The rumor is they want a third for him. To me, that's way too much for an expiring deal. He's a gadget kind of player. He's not an every down player. Torrey Horn looked really good last night. I don't know how long Kupp is going to be out, but hamstrings we've seen him with Julian Love. That's the trickiest injury in the league. So we mentioned the positions of need: linebacker, receiver, another edge rusher. They tried to sign Von Miller. That never ended up happening. But DeMarcus Lawrence have been probably better than they expected at this point. So that's not a necessity. I'd say linebacker, right guard, maybe receiver. I think running back, you probably leave it. I think it's more of an issue with the run blocking at this point, but that may change at some point, maybe in the offseason, if you can get the run blocking a little better. I think that's something they might explore.
It's going to be a very interesting 24 hours. Like I said, I don't know when to go to bed because I don't want to miss anything. If the Seahawks are going to do anything, if you could do it in the next hour and a half, that'd be great. So, Jeff, before we get on to the super chats to finish, we should talk a little bit about the game yesterday, which is what we usually do on a Monday. It was terrific, and then with the caveat that the Commanders are just in a horrible place. I mean, they are an absolute mess. The players that are injured are hurting them. They have a lot of, I'd just say, older, crappier players at this point, and players who are well past their best. The quarterback is obviously is very, very hurt, and it's a real issue for them. They've not got a great deal to be excited about there. Can you hear us, Jeff? I think we might have lost Jeff for a second. I'll carry on talking. There's obviously a lot wrong with the Commanders, and they are going to have to get younger. They're going to have to draft well. They're going to have to get better there, and it is what it is. However, you could make the argument that the Cardinals are not in a great place. You could make an argument that the Jaguars aren't very good. You could make an argument that Tampa Bay had a whole bunch of injuries, and the Seahawks still made hard work of those games. And in the case of Tampa Bay, actually lost that game. And to go to Washington and absolutely demolish the Commanders I think it is to be celebrated. It is to be enjoyed, and it is to be embraced. I thought that was fantastic, Jeff. That we kind of got a real glimpse of Mike Macdonald's schematic intelligence on defense at its absolute best. We see a team that looks connected, that looks intense. I think it's a really likable team. It's very easy to root for this team. I think it speaks to that fact that we have no divisive conversations amongst Seahawks fans at the moment. Like, everybody just is getting along and enjoying it. And then offensively, just an absolute tour de force. You mentioned it earlier, we're talking about the offensive line. Jackson Smith-Njigba looks like the best receiver in the NFL. The statistics suggest that he is. I mean, look, Jamar Chase is... It's going to be pretty hard to sort of say that anyone's better than Jamar Chase. He's ridiculous. But he's up there, isn't he? Like, he is a top-tier receiver at this point. Darnold's playing brilliantly well. There's just so much to like, Jeff. It's just I just feel so much more joyful and positive and happy about the Seahawks than I did 2 years ago. And that's to be cheered, I think.
Yeah, there's a pretty good case. They should be 8-0 right now. And and the crazy part is their 2 losses. They were leading within the last 2 minutes of the game. And one game just took a horrific defense, and one game plan was so bad in offense, and Tariq Woolen made some of the worst plays you've ever seen. If not, they win both those games. They're 8-0. And none of the other games have really been close. Like, some of the games got a little closer, but the Seahawks have been significantly better in every game. That's the sign. They have a higher point differential, from what I understand, than even 2013 through 8 games, and even 2005. So those are probably the 2 best teams in Seahawks history. They're at a higher level. And the amount of just things they have working for them right now, all 3 levels, when it's hitting, they look scary. Like, even the first drive, I thought just said so much about them, where they take that chop block penalty. They're 1st and 25. And they just get the first down. And I thought, like, JSN there, he was so smooth. He just gets like 12 yards in the first play. They get half the yards back. They can't cover him. And, like, you think, like, someone's going to put 2 guys on him, they're going to take him out of the game. No one's been able to do it. He just gets open, and they use him so creatively. So you have the passing game working. I thought Robbie Utes made a big difference. I thought he looked a little better in the run game. I thought that looked better. And defense, with Nick Emanwari and Witherspoon and all these guys back, with the defensive line they have, and when Ernest Jones is going, with even Drake Thomas is playing a little better. They just have so many things that work, and it says a lot about Mike Macdonald. It's so many of the good teams in the league. They have great coaches. They're winning with players, and they're winning with coaches. The Seahawks right now have both. All of those drafts we talked about for years, me and you. These are the guys that are flashing on this team. The pickups they've made over the last few years. Leonard Williams, Ernest Jones, all these people last year. Rob, me and you debate all year, like, let's trade DK Metcalf. Everyone's like, how could they do that? You can't trade DK Metcalf. Everyone in the offseason, all the national media, this team is nuts. They replaced essentially DK Metcalf with a 5th-round pick yesterday, who had like 10 times the yard. DK Metcalf's making $33 million a year. Had 6 yards yesterday in a game they won, but still, Torrey Horton looked excellent. He did some really cool stuff. So they have players beyond players. They have depth. They're being coached really well. Even Jay Harbaugh, who's a guy who people wanted fired last year, they're the number 1 special teams in the league this year. So Mike Macdonald said after the Houston game, what do you think is going to happen when all 3 of these hit at the same time? That's what last night was. Because I look at Washington conservatively. It's a great story. They made the NFC Championship last year. I thought their offseason was awful. And I'm not just saying that in hindsight. I thought at the time, I didn't understand. They have Jaden Daniels on a rookie contract, and they're one of the oldest teams in the league. They've brought in Laramie Tunsil, and they brought in Deebo Samuel, and they get Zach Ertz back. And who are the young? Like, they draft Josh Connerly, who's kind of a tweener, been one of the worst ranked right tackles in the league. Bobby Wagner. They're an old Von Miller. Like, they're an old and slow team. So on paper, I'm like, the Seahawks should whoop these guys. They're young and fast. They're big and they're strong. And outside of Jaden Daniels, like, who are the? And then Terry McLaurin goes out. I'm like, this is very one-sided. And look, I just went through a very rough week with my baseball team. We lost in the most painful way I've ever, other than the Seahawks in the Super Bowl, one of the And so I was so nervous about just another more disappointment to see them come out and just go up 28-0 and just boom, boom, boom. It was very joyful. It was like the most rewarding watch I've had in a long time. Coming off how the weekend went for me, that was really needed. And just seeing, like, they get that turnover and they throw to Arroyo and JSN's wide open on the other side. We haven't even unlocked some of these guys. Seeing Horton and Arroyo and, like, you look at this rookie class in general, we were so excited about it. These guys can get better in the second half. It just feels like they got players everywhere. And some of the offseason takes on them were just so bad. I remember Mike Renner came on and said, the Seahawks don't even have the tight ends the Saints did last year. When A.J. Barner and Arroyo. And unbelievable. And then today, I remember Renner came out also and was like, the Seahawks drafted a guard and a safety. And then today I said, he's like, I'm regretting that the Ravens didn't trade Eamon Morey to play with.
I saw that.
It's like, which one is it? Zabel and Eamon Morey look like an A+ start to this draft.
Yeah, and then look at what Torrey Horton's doing in round 5, and look at I think Elijah Arroyo got his first touchdown yesterday. I think there's a lot more to come from him. Robbie Utes, there's a lot of quality there, a lot of exciting things from this draft class. Let's get through the super chats. If anyone's got any extra ones, stick them in. But the fact that you mentioned, I forgot that the Commanders had made the NFC Championship game, and so you reminded me of that, and it just makes me think there's absolutely no reason why the Seahawks couldn't play in that game. Now, admittedly, there's absolutely no reason why the Rams, the Lions, the Packers, the Eagles, there's a whole bunch of teams who could play in it. The Seahawks are one of them, and we couldn't have said that 2 years ago. So that's the good thing. Noah says the Brady Hawk blogger interaction was revealing. It certainly was, because I have to say I agree with Brian. I would have assumed that they might think, because they're traditionally what they do is they wait until the last year of the deal and then they get the extension done. If they re-sign JSN and Witherspoon next year, that would be sort of going against that. So I was a little bit surprised, but Brady said it, so I'm believing that's going to happen. This one from G says, dollars to fund Rob's transatlantic trip to carry Max Crosby on his back. Great. Thank you for that. Yes, much appreciated. And this one from Marcus says, love the show. You guys are only looking at half of the trade scenario. You have to take into consideration what the other team's capital implications are. The penalties alone for Garrett cripple Cleveland. I don't know if maybe you're just sort of watching on catch up, Marcus. Appreciate the super chat. We have discussed that. I mentioned that it's $20 million this year in dead money for Cleveland and $40 million next year. And I went as far to even reference that the Dolphins today agreed to take on $6 million of Jalen Phillips' salary to get a better draft pick. And it was being sort of phrased that they've bought a third-round pick for $6 million. So I calculated that, well, what's a couple of firsts and let's say a couple of thirds worth? Is that worth $60 million? It might be if you look at the Jalen Phillips cost for a third. So I think we all accept that it's going to cost Cleveland a lot of money. I mean, Cleveland are a team of all the teams that are willing to sit on a horrendous contract, cough Deshaun Watson cough, and just sort of eat all of that and just live through it. Maybe they would be willing to buy some draft picks off you. I don't know. We have seen that with Brock Osweiler. Teams will tend to do that sometimes. So I'm not for a second neglecting that. We have talked about it. I just think that it's not to rule it out. And this one from Sam says, with Riley Mills hoping to start near the end of the regular season, does the idea of the Hawks trading interior defensive line make sense? I don't know. I don't think so, Jeff. I think that's one of their areas of strength. And for me, Riley Mills, if he gets back, great. I almost incline not just a red shirt for the year, Jeff. Do you really need to rush Riley Mills onto the field? I mean, if he's actually,
how do you do it?
I was going to say,
if he looks amazing,
if he looks amazing, get him out there. If not, shut him down. Just get him back next year.
Felt like a red shirt year to me.
I don't think trading for against interior makes a great deal of sense unless it's just an unbelievable opportunity. Like if the Titans say, do you want Jeffrey Simmons for a third? Yeah. But I'm not sure that something like that's going to materialize. Anyway, we have done exactly an hour. Jeff, much appreciated. We didn't do anything while we were on the stream, so I'm expecting in the next 10 minutes there will be a trade. But great to speak, and it's good to catch up, and hopefully they're going to do something very interesting. So big thank you to Jeff. Always great to have Jeff with us. A quick one. Do you know what? I turned notifications on Adam Schefter's tweets for while we were on here, and I've just had a notification from Adam Schefter, and I was thinking, is this it? And it's just an update about Kyler Murray's foot injury. Anyway, final sort of note for everybody who is here. Don't forget to like the video. Please do subscribe. I think we hit 11K last night, so that's really nice, but let's start the move up towards 12K, because half of you who watch the videos are not subscribed. If you could like the video, if you could leave a comment in the comment section, even if you've been chatting in the live chat, go and leave a quick comment, even if it's just to say what you give up for Myles Garrett, what you give up for Max Crosby, what you think they're going to do, who you want them to go and target. Even if you just want to say go Hawks, go and leave a comment there, and that would be a massive help. What else have we got coming up? Tomorrow, Bump and Stacey on Seattle Sports. I will join Bump and Stacey, and I will post the embed of that video onto SeahawksDraftBlog.com. And then the Seahawks Collective at 5 p.m. Pacific time, where we will react to everything that's been going on, or maybe doesn't go on, in the the trade deadline that is taking place tomorrow. And then Puck Sports on Wednesday as well as usual. And then, we'll see how it goes. Maybe I won't do a draft piece on Thursday. If they've traded away all of their draft picks, maybe I'll reflect on who they've traded for and what it means. We will see. What I will say is, if anything happens in the next hour and a half, 2 hours, I will come back on and I will do another live stream to react to it. Likewise, if something happens tomorrow, if I can, I will do immediate reaction. If not, I'll try and write some words down on SeahawksDraftBlog.com. So go and check out the website there. Great live numbers. Really appreciate you all watching. Do stick with us. Do subscribe. Until next time, bye for now.